Yeah. Welcome back.
Right, man. I'm actually I'm gonna pour myself a beer.
Oh yeah.
Found this Colorado's awesome, man. We've got like all kinds of like craft brew. And this is I mean, they don't it says so it's crafted to remove gluten. So it's brewed with grains that contain gluten and it has been crafted to remove gluten. But then it says it cannot be verified that this beer does not have gluten. So, like, I think we're gluten free, man, and I've been trying to find a gluten free beer, and this stuff is freaking amazing, man. You would never know, but it's a little vanilla in your rye.
Nice.
I'm gonna have a beer today.
Yeah.
It's
Been
really
in
good.
meetings literally all day. We had meetings scheduled from 9 this morning till 5:30 tonight.
Yes, man.
Yeah.
Meetings to have meetings, or were they productive meetings?
It was training. We're trying to do a whole transformation at the company. It's a lot of company-wide training things, so it's always good.
Yeah.
Yeah, trying to be more productive and everything.
Cheers.
Cheers. Yeah. I got my big water jug that's comically large. Which yeah, what was it? Yeah, early in the week we were talking about coaching was one of the things we that came up.
Yeah.
Everything, yeah. Oh, because I know,
Yeah.
yeah, because you tried coaching for a bit, or we're doing it.
I I
Dabble.
did. I did. And yeah, I mean, like all things, we've got opinions on on that, and the opinions are probably more in line with online coaching, not coaching in general per se. But yeah, I tried a little bit of online coaching once upon a time. I didn't care for it myself. Um, I I gotta be honest, man. I felt dirty charging people for what I thought was just like too basic of information, like stuff that you could just find anywhere on the internet. I wasn't training any like advanced athletes. It was mostly new people, and yeah, I didn't like charging money for such simplistic programming. I found, but that too, and I mean, kind of getting back to our episode too, like I don't find joy in helping people that won't help themselves either. So um, I so like the charging didn't really work for me for people that weren't doing the work. So I actually ended up finding myself just helping people that I liked working with, people that were working hard, and just helping them for free because that made me feel better. I was like, my reward was more like I wasn't going to make a lot of money off of it anyway. I mean, I don't know if I wanted to do that full time, right? So I was just happy. Like my reward was just seeing people that wanted to work hard and grow and be better every day, succeed. So that was kind of my brief experience in coaching, and it was kind of,
Yeah.
it wasn't in person. It was kind of calling it online isn't really coaching, right? It's just writing a program and giving some feedback.
Yeah. And a lot of people charge so much for it these days. I know people who charge like hundreds and hundreds of dollars for those type of things. And I think you're right that a lot of times, unless you're really like catering or tailoring the program to that person, a lot of times it is those things that you could find programming online if you're just going to do something generic and
Yeah.
everything. Like oftentimes you see people almost essentially prescribing their training just for other people. Like just that idea of like, here's what I'm doing, do what I do.
Yeah. And that's kind of where, yeah, I didn't feel right doing it because I'm not like a formally trained strength and conditioning coach. I didn't have any certification. All my knowledge is really just what works for me and what I've been doing. And I kind of found, I don't know, I guess kind of found like an internal conflict on trying to coach people when I didn't have the expertise, the real knowledge to help people as individuals, right? And to design training that was unique to them. That's where, somebody that has training, like legitimate certification, that's their career, it's their profession, maybe that's justifiable for them to charge. But yeah, I mean, you see on the socials all the time, like these people that, like you said, are, they're selling programming that's probably not even original. I mean, I know I've seen some people do this, right? Their programming is exactly almost to the T to this guy at the gym who's using another coach in the same kind of sphere or sport, right? And somebody else is selling that the exact same program to somebody else, and that person just happens to be their coach, right? It's
Yeah.
like that's not coaching, man. That's like blatant plagiarism.
Yeah. And a
And I'm
lot of
surprised
times,
that more coaches don't get pissed about that. And maybe they do. I don't know. I've just never seen it, but yeah, I mean, I've kind of noticed that from time to time, seeing that kind of like plagiaristic programming. Somebody's paying one coach for programming, and they're just turning around and like regurgitating it to their athletes, right?
yeah. And I think a lot of times it is that of just trying to like essentially replicate the success rather than like match people's goals and everything. Because the thing is, every athlete is different and has a lot of times people do have different goals. It is one of those things of you need to tailor it to what people are doing. And also, I mean, I have nothing against if you're just going to sell a 12-week program as a PDF. Like,
Yeah.
that's one thing, but it's
So
interesting.
for a reasonable price
Yeah.
too, right?
Like some people do that for like 15 bucks, 30 bucks or whatever for a
It's
12-week
cool.
block. But then like charging people $300 a month, which I've seen so many coaches doing, that they're essentially giving some basic programming and then doing what someone could just record in like MyFitnessPal or something as far as like nutrition goes.
Yeah, man. I don't think online coaching, in my opinion, is not worth that much money a month. I mean, people are willing to pay for it though, right? So, my opinion is it's not worth it, but it's apparently worth it to some people, right? I mean, the market, I guess, kind of people's willingness to spend money is what kind of dictates market pricing, right? In a truly free market. So, me, I would never pay that much. I mean, I pay my coach like a lot less than that, and I get like in person coaching. Like that, and that's a coach to me is like somebody in person that's going to be there, and I mean he's not always there when I'm training, but um but you get some actual one-on-one time, eyes on, and the opportunity to discuss your training, your form, bounce ideas off of each other, right? There's a lot of value to that. And yeah, like I don't know, calling online coaching is not really, I mean, it's kind of a kind of a misnomer to me because it's
Yeah.
not truly coaching. It's online programming and maybe remote advisement. I don't I don't know what
Yeah.
you call
And I
it,
think,
but it's not really coaching.
yeah, it's one of those things like I currently am doing online coaching and everything, but so far things have been tailored to me and you get that form of advice. And as long as you're making forward progress, it's like, I think that's the important part. Because the thing that also can be disconcerting for me is to see how many people will just like keep taking money from people who aren't improving. And it's like one of the things that sold me on my coach was he was like, if you don't see progress or you're not satisfied, like don't do this and everything. Because
Right.
at the end of the day, I think the part that most people seem to miss is that like as a coach, you're essentially in the customer service business and everything. Like you're providing an actual service where oftentimes I think people tend to, it's funny, it's like kind of the meme of you see people online who are in their mid-20s who are essentially advertising themselves being a fitness lifestyle coach and everything. And it's like, well, I guess like that could mean something, but I think oftentimes people tend to either overvalue their services or sometimes it feels like almost there's a level of taking advantage of people trying to say, here's my success, you can replicate it by doing this and everything, which in an oversaturated market, like you said, the market will charge what the market charges. But I think oftentimes you have people who really are, I think deep down, most people want to improve themselves. And you have many people are willing to take advantage of that
Sure.
process.
Sure. I mean, it's kind of business in general, right? That's
Yeah.
why we have the phrase caveat emptor, right? Buyer beware.
Yeah.
Um, and you know, I mean, it truly, it's really up to the buyer, the consumer, the person paying for the coaching to educate themselves and know, you know, who they're hiring. Um,
Yeah.
because I mean, reputation is out there if you're willing to go and find it. I mean, unfortunately, like you said, I mean, the market is saturated with online coaches. I mean, there are a dime a dozen, right? And there's probably very few that are worth the actual money, right? Like, I mean, cookie cutter programming, regurgitated, parroted programming from somebody else, like plagiarized programming. I mean, it's just everywhere. And then you've got the guys that are, you know, have zero experience. Like it always blows my mind when, you know, somebody a novice in strongman, you know, has a couple months under their belt, and all of a sudden they're a fucking coach. They're a strongman coach. Like, I mean, more power to you, I guess. I mean, if you can get people to, you can trick people into giving you money. You know, I mean, again, caveat emptor, right? Buyer
Yeah.
beware. But you know, knowing that, like I've always kind of said too, that uh, if you turn to somebody that's never achieved anything, you should expect to not achieve anything, right?
Yeah.
You know, people that have no accomplishments aren't going to really help you reach your goals because they've never really achieved anything either, right? I mean, it kind of gets back to that whole thought process of surrounding yourself with people that are better than you, right? You surround yourself with 9 idiots, you're sure to be the 10th, right? And it kind of goes to the same line of thinking with coaching. Like you go and hire somebody that's never achieved anything, or I mean, and achievement could be a lot of things, right? I'm not just saying like your coach has to be a well decorated veteran athlete, but you know, going through the schooling, the education, the certification, you know, the experience, like, is an accomplishment too, right? And some of the greatest coaches weren't the greatest athletes. Some of the greatest teachers, right? I mean, I was kind of say those that can't, you know, teach, right? Those that do can't, those that can do, those can't teach. But you know, there's some really great teachers out there. And that's what they specialize in. So, but I mean, they still, you know, paid their dues in one way or the other. Going to somebody that has very little, if no experience, like you're not probably going to get what you're hoping out of that transaction.
Yeah, because I think a lot of times, I think the biggest thing you can do to help improve yourself is by being around people who are also trying to improve themselves. Of like being, you want to be at a gym or something where people are really pushing themselves and motivating everyone around them and everything. Because oftentimes that can be, programming makes a huge difference in everything, but also who you're around and everything. If you're doing just something that's a cookie cutter program by yourself or around people who aren't necessarily striving, like average effort receive like gets
Yeah,
average results and
exactly.
everything. So I
Yeah,
think, yeah,
go ahead.
like you want people who are actually pushing themselves, but also, like you said, offering that feedback of like seeing, being around people who are actually trying to build each other up. Of like, I've always been impressed to see like veteran athletes trying to help other people and just giving out this advice and everything, rather than sometimes people almost just kind of put up this kind of paywall approach of like, well, like buy my program and you'll know. And it's like, if someone's doing something wrong in front of you, like just tell them and everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, dude. It's kind of funny. Like when you said that, I put this paywall. If you pay for my program, you'll know. It's like in the fantasy movies, right? When they're trying to get information from the back alley, like hooded figure, they got to give him money, right? Then a little bit more money to get more advice. I don't know. But yeah, man, I like, again, like I said, I mean, that's not my profession, right? I'd rather just help people. I've always been more than happy to answer any questions anybody has, and share my knowledge freely because I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I value it enough to put a dollar sign on it. Because it's just experience, right?
Yeah.
It's not like I mean, again, I mean, I've paid a lot of money over the years to compete in strongman, but just my time training and what I've learned about myself, and again, it's all just my personal experience, right? It may not work for everybody, so I don't know, man. Me personally, I have a hard time putting a value on information that's just like, I don't know. I kind of feel like as veterans, it's sort of our duty um, to pass on information to the next generation of lifters, right? It's kind of etiquette, I guess. Um, yeah, I don't know. That's just me personally. Like, I don't. It's not my profession, right? So maybe I don't have room to speak there. But not my profession. I'm more than happy to give away advice and what I know freely.
Yeah, I think that makes a big difference because I think one of the things that too, I mean, you mentioned it kind of for people who feel like they have a few months under their belt or something. There is this like kind of pervasive thing you'll see in the fitness industry of people having an unearned sense of superiority of like, here's what I've done. And it's like a lot of times it's not necessarily that impressive and everything. Kind of like what we talked about last time of like you always have to know like how exactly did you get to nationals or like how exactly did you win these things because like there are those examples of people if you won and you were the only person in your class that's a very different competition than going in a stacked class and winning and everything
Right.
that kind of comes back to that idea of was it an actual win or an actual victory and I think oftentimes people kind of want to like leapfrog into success almost. It's that idea of like people almost kind of like seeking out easy wins and in a way bringing on new clients who don't have much experience and everything and charging them a bunch of money. Like that is a pretty easy win financially and
Right.
everything. But you have to think like, what's your motivation behind it? And are you actually like providing that benefit and that value? Because I think so often people, it is a high price tag and everything. This idea of it is expensive to compete and everything. And it's that idea of you need to be getting actual value back for the money that you put out. Kind of like we've talked about in the past with like competitions and everything of like when you're paying for something, you should be getting value for that. And I think sometimes there's this idea of like, you're lucky to get what you get. And it's like, no, if you're paying for something, you should be receiving something of equal value.
Absolutely. But I mean, when you hire coaching, though, I mean, there's no standards, right? You're hiring an individual who doesn't work for anybody half the time, so their standards are their own, and it can be a little bit of trial and error, I think, to some extent. Again, there's people out there with good reputation. There's enough information out there, so I mean, new athletes a lot of times I think may get led astray in believing that they need to have a coach because the industry, if you will, right, preaches that because that's their bread and butter,
Yeah.
right? And they go out and try to convince like all these people you need a coach. If you want to get anywhere, you need a coach. Well, that's not really true, right? You kind of alluded to it here just a minute ago too. Is that right? There's no, and we kind of talked about this in the last episode too. Like, there's no secret formula. There's no perfect right program. There's no perfect right diet. I mean, diet is a little bit more scientific. I mean, I'll give it that. But there's no the only true tried and true proven method for getting better is hard fucking work, right? And so you can walk down several paths to get to the same goal, right? um and as a beginner especially, like I encourage all beginners, like don't go hire a coach if you're new to lifting or the strongman or anything like that. Just go online and grab some of the you know quote unquote cookie cutter programs that exist out there. They're fun. you're going to make huge gains no matter what because you're a beginner. Um, so yeah, I wouldn't waste your money on coaching, and because you can get a long, long, long ways on just the information that exists online. Now, some people aren't willing to go, like they like the convenience of paying for somebody. Well, that's fine, I guess, but do your research and know who you're hiring. I wouldn't hire just anybody. Um, but it's your money, spend it however you want. But I would definitely recommend, if you're new, just go and grab some. There's a lot of good programs, beginner programs online. They're absolutely free. Just do the work. Just work hard, and you're going to make huge gains. You're going to be successful in that short run, right? Until you become an intermediate athlete, and even then, there's a lot of good free programming out there for intermediate athletes. Like hiring a coach to me is something that you do when you've reached like the upper end of intermediate or elite lifting, right? When your gains start slowing down, they become harder. You need that specialized programming to start targeting weaknesses and areas that really need improvement. That's what a coach is for, right?
Yeah. I think those things of like, I think it's important to, like you said, do your research and see what's out there, because I think oftentimes what also surprises me is so many people at the beginning who you really should be filming what you do and comparing it to like what's out there and everything, like trying to actively improve yourself. And I think sometimes there's this idea of like you need a specific way to do things or like someone to tell you what to do. But I think oftentimes you also want to be able to like recognize what's a good lift and what's not a good lift and like be able to see that and
That's where you're
everything.
training with people, with like a group of people, like, and maybe that's not available to everybody because I know some people live in more remote areas where those strongman or powerlifting groups or whatever may not really exist. But if you look hard enough, you search out people, um, especially in like the metropolitan areas, go train with a group of people. I mean, you're gonna learn a lot as a beginner, no matter what, just training with other people, right? But you're right. I mean, video your lists, post them. I mean, I, there used to be forums that you could just post right, your videos for open
Yeah.
like public comment. I don't know if that exists anymore.
I think
I guess
people still
socials
do
still
it with
do.
Reddit.
You just post it on the socials and ask for advice, man. I mean, tag away.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of people out there that are willing to give advice for free.
Yeah. And I think a recurring theme is kind of that idea of like after a while, the best teacher is experience. Like simply go and do something, of like
Absolutely.
really push yourself, of like I think sometimes people said do almost like internal gatekeeping of being like, oh, I'm not ready to do this, or like I can't do it on my own. And I think while there is value in getting help from people, you also have to be a self-starter.
Yeah.
Like you have to find balance in that, because I think oftentimes there's this idea of like that somehow other people like naturally were better at something, so that's why they did it. And it's like most everyone, it takes years and years of practice to be good at something. Like you
Yeah.
can't simply walk up to it and just be good at it. And it's that same idea. I think it comes down to like recording lifts and everything, of like don't be afraid to like show people you making mistakes, because like that's how you learn and everything. I think oftentimes people kind of like we've talked to about before of like not wanting to receive feedback or perceiving anything that isn't like great
Positive.
job is like
Yeah.
an insult and everything. Whereas like the most effective feedback you can get is by actually receiving actual feedback and
Right.
listening to it. Like you can't just simply only pay attention to people who cheer you on and everything. That idea of, I think, like actually wanting to actually improve yourself,
Yeah.
everything, rather than, I think sometimes there's this idea of like once you've created kind of like or follow the cultural pattern of like you're doing this to win and everything, like winning's the reason. It's like winning is good, but it's not the only why. Like you want to be a better person along the way. It's this idea of
Yeah.
like
Winning should always be the end goal, right? I mean, that's the winning is the destination, right? But you
Yeah.
can't get to the destination without the journey, right?
Yeah.
You still you have to still have to walk or travel that path, and that path is going to be fraught with failure, mistakes, learning, growth, etc. Right? And that path, like we talked in the last episode, is long. Like you said, it's longer for some people than others. Right? I'm a good example. It took me a long time to get to where I'm at now, and even kind of like we were talking earlier. I mean, strongman still doesn't have the strongest people in it because there's so many in it. I'm probably in the big scheme of things a very mediocre strongman, right? Um, but yeah, it's a journey. It's a journey, and for some of us, it's maybe a never ending journey. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't always be trying to progress down that path, right? That down that path to whatever the destination. I mean, I say winning, right? I mean, winning means a lot of things. Is that winning a show, a specific title? Is it a certain type of success in life, financial? Whatever it is, right? You always forward, right?
Yeah. Like you want to have high ambitions and everything. And I think a part of it, I mean, that's another thing. I think why you have to look around at like people who train a lot of different modalities is realizing sometimes there's this strong sense with some people that like, oh, like strongman is the strongest and everything. When I think oftentimes you'll see these people who are doing other things of Olympic weightlifting or CrossFit and everything who like could actually be record holders and everything. Like it's amazing to watch like some of the women at my gym who are doing Olympic weightlifting, like throwing big weight over their head, like it's nothing and everything. And I think a part of it, I think maybe that standardization will help and everything. But like it's kind of a cyclical thing of like people don't take it seriously if it's not being well run. And if it's not being well run, you aren't having enough entries to make a good show. So I think trying to find ways to like get that engagement and everything to see of like trying to pull other people in because I think I was still turning it over in my head when you were saying that CrossFit essentially took strongman and made it profitable. And it's like they make money off the charts.
If you look at early CrossFit, man, it was literally. I mean, they still do strongman events, right? I mean,
Yeah.
but I think it. I kind of remember it being very much just strongman events in the beginning, right? I mean, there wasn't really a weightlifting or gymnastics element in the very beginning. I kind of grew. Because CrossFit kind of grew into that and kind of diversified itself from that perspective. But I mean, there's still a very strong or very significant part of it is strong. I mean, we're still doing yokes. I mean, sandbags for the shoulders, right? Um, I'm pretty sure they do farmers walks, stuff like
Yeah.
that. I mean, those are strongman events. But yeah, now I mean they're doing strongman events, and then they're doing gymnastics and Olympic weightlifting. So I mean, they're more technical, they're more explosive, they're better, they're more fit, right? They're more conditioned, right? And then their strength on top of all of that is, I mean, it's basically as good as any of the weight class strongman athletes. And yeah, strongman. I mean, that's a man, that's a rabbit hole. I think we could we could tumble down a long way. Strongman really not maybe being the strongest.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think it's pretty logical though. I mean, reasonable to say that strongman, doesn't have the strongest athletes because the strongest athletes are, in the NFL or they're in, boxing or, wherever they're making more money. I mean, even look at Hathor. I mean, he was one of the strongest, absolutely strongest men on the planet, but he went to boxing because there's way more money in it, right?
Yeah.
Um, I guess time will tell if he stays there, but uh, yeah, I think it's very reasonable to say that the strongest humans aren't in strongman, and there's always going to be somebody stronger, right? There's freaks of nature working on a farm somewhere that you will never know. Right?
Yeah. And I think that is the interesting point, is to think of like that example of many of those people just like doing group classes until you find something that you're good at, rather than sometimes like I think oftentimes you'll see people go into CrossFit and sometimes go into other sports from there because like it introduces you to a wide variety of things to like
Yeah.
see what you're good at. And I think oftentimes people tend to kind of make fun of CrossFit because of like the memes and stuff online and everything. But like a lot of the things that they're doing are actually really impressive weights. And I think it
CrossFit
comes,
athletes are super impressive. Like
yeah,
the vast majority of strongman athletes couldn't hold a candle to CrossFit athletes.
yeah,
That whole like mockery, I think started in the beginning because there was probably some animosity, right? That CrossFit became profitable, and there's probably still a little bit that they make more money than strongman athletes. I mean, I don't know where it all kind of really derives from, but you're right. I mean, we shouldn't be mocking any other sport, period. I mean, even bodybuilding, sometimes it's got a bad rap for, being posers or whatever. Those motherfuckers work hard too, man. I mean, it's not easy work. I mean, and truthfully, we're all bodybuilders at the end of the day. If you're working on building your body, are you not a bodybuilder? Of course you are, right? We're all strength athletes in some regard too. We shouldn't, like, strongman of all sports, should not be mocking any other strength sport out there: bodybuilding, CrossFit, powerlifting, weightlifting, I think any of it. Because there's a lot to mock in strongman too.
yeah, which I think is oftentimes why sometimes people tend to be kind of like an insular community at times, because there is that thing. You see people come from these other disciplines, like Melissa Peacock being a bodybuilder, like lightweight bodybuilder, to now like being a world record holder and everything.
She's
If you take
crazy.
that level of discipline, yeah, like astoundingly strong is a 181 and everything. Like that's an exceptional level of strength. And oftentimes, I think people tend to kind of fall into this like spiral in a way of almost making excuses for like not necessarily holding themselves to high standards and everything. This idea that like to be strong, you have to be big. You just like eat whatever you want. Like it doesn't matter how you look aesthetics wise and everything. And I think oftentimes you realize looking at these other sports, like watching the CrossFit games, they're impossibly fit people who are still throwing up decent numbers and everything. And
They're
I
putting
think,
up huge numbers, but you kind of look though too, like powerlifting, and strongman back in like the 90s and early 2000s were just a bunch of fat fucks, right? They were strong as shit, but Jesus, they were fat, right? And it's just like a bunch of like body mass that really at the end of the day, right? Fat tissue, adipose tissue doesn't contract, man. It's not making you stronger. Um, kind of fast forward now, and I mean, strongman and really definitely powerlifting has gone a different direction, and now these guys are leaner, putting up bigger numbers, they're stronger than ever before. So there's been kind of an evolution there for sure. That concept of just being big and just eating whatever you want, I mean, it still kind of exists in certain areas, but the top guys anymore, they're not those big fat slow guys. I mean, I shouldn't say slow. I mean, even Big Z, when he was, dude, he was very robust at one time. He was remarkably agile for how big he was. Um, but um, but yeah, I mean, there's been definitely a change in regard to body composition. And I think people kind of started realizing, hey, it was unhealthy. We look like crap, and it's not doing anything for it. So it's not doing us any favors, right?
yeah,
So why not be lean and look good and represent the sport well? Um,
no, that
and
makes
you're
a
starting to see
huge.
more guys, especially the weight class athletes, definitely are looking much leaner and way more jacked these days.
And the things people do are astounding. I mean, you bring up powerlifting and you look at Jamal Brown, or yes, it was sumo and straps, but pulled 500 kilos.
Dude,
That's like a
without a suit,
242.
totally fucking raw. I mean, yeah, he used straps, but hey, man, that's good enough for strongman standards. He did without a suit. And he didn't. it didn't look that damn hard either.
Yeah, and that's the thing of like it's not even the craziest, like it's not the widest sumo stance you've ever seen either.
Yeah.
Everything. Like it's
That's where I'm like, when people start talking about like sumo is cheating or whatever, it's like, can you do that? Doubtful.
yeah. Because that's the thing. They'll always use those examples of the guy pulling 700 pounds with a 2 inch range of motion and everything. It's like, yeah, that guy's a misnomer of like in or not representative of so many other people out there. If you have these people now who you do have to think about it to pull 500 kg without a suit, like I think the 500 kg that was in like triple ply or like a metal king or something like or
Multi,
metal.
yeah, I think they're considered multi-ply in most powerlifting federations. As soon as you have the Velcro straps,
Yeah,
I think that's the factor that considers it multi-ply.
yeah. So that makes a huge difference of like seeing these things and realizing. I think that's also it can be humbling for some people when we talk about like in episode one of like or before we've talked about people being afraid of like feeling emasculated or unexceptional and everything. And it's like, no, that's the most realistic way to be about yourself is to say, to look at these people with like so many of these powerlifting world records now, like people are pulling astounding numbers of like you. I mean, John Hack's talking about like joining strongman and everything. It's like that guy's a madman.
I mean, hopefully, like
198.
hopefully he can move. I mean, he's another guy that's really lean, looks very athletic. I would assume that he's going to probably be a very athletic competitor. You've seen guys in the past like Brian Siders, incredible power lifter, but totally unathletic. And when he came to strongman, he was statically very strong, but just couldn't move well. You could kind of tell that he spent his strength training years in a static position, right? Didn't move. So I mean, hopefully, I mean, you get some of these newer powerlifters that are, they certainly look athletic, will be athletic, and kind of prove that, you know, other strength sports certainly have the potential to be the strongest competitors.
Yeah, and the amount of money too that's being thrown around in powerlifting now is crazy to see some of these people at the top, like what the cash prizes and stuff are getting paid out. Like, so it clearly is there. I think you just have to have standards and like manage audience engagement because there is that excitement of, I mean, you think some of these things like the CrossFit Games, it's like event after event after event. It's like these, they can do like 5 events in just a matter of hours and everything. And I think it can be a little bit challenging when you're expecting people to like watch a 8 hour event and everything to like watch like one lift every 5 minutes or something.
Yeah.
This
Well,
idea.
again, I
So
mean, we got Clash that's doing that much better, right? I mean, that's
yeah.
probably. I mean, Clash is doing a lot of things much better. But if I was to, I got to think about that before I say it. I'm not saying anything bad. I just want to make sure, like, because I'm going to say, like, I think that might be one of the probably the best things that they're actually doing. I mean, from an audience in engagement, audience being attracted to an audience from that kind of perspective, that might be one of like the best things that they're doing from that perspective is moving fast. Doing those shows in 2.5, two. I mean, finals this year was 2 hours, right? 2 fucking hours, which is
Yeah.
tough from the athletes, but I mean, they're gonna either rise to the occasion or they're not, right? And I mean, you kind of get back to that. Are strongmen really the strongest athletes? Are they really the fittest? I mean, well, CrossFit's the fittest, but I mean, if they're going to hold a candle to those other athletes and really prove that they're, worthy of the strongest, um, there's some strides that they have to make, and I think that's a big one, right? Is proving that these guys can still perform extraordinarily well in a much shorter time frame. It kind of proves that old um, style of competition organization isn't necessary, right? Or that it can be done better, and it can be done in a much more palatable and attractive way, and the athletes can still perform, extraordinarily well.
Yeah, I mean, you talk
Which is
about like,
a huge feather in the cap of strongman and Clash, in my opinion.
yeah. And two, I mean, they still have their world record events and stuff of like Camby being able to do his axle after days
Freak.
worth of competing.
Yeah, he's such a freak.
Yeah. I mean, that's just
so,
like,
so I mean, I think Camby is definitely one of those anomalies that we talk about not having the strongest people in strongman. I mean, there's definitely, and I would be curious. It would be interesting to see. I mean, there's always somebody stronger, right? Where they
yeah,
are, who they are, kind of remains to be seen. But I mean, you had guys like Klokov in Olympic weightlifting. I mean, I don't know what his best was, but I remember I'll never forget the video, and you've probably seen this too. Of him push pressing 495 like with
yeah,
nothing, right? Could he clean a non-rotating axle? And that's a whole other story, right? But certainly there's guys out there that have stronger overhead capability, but are they that well-rounded capability that Camby has? Certainly, I would is probably one of the best in the apps, one of the absolute best in. I think is what I'm trying to say.
yeah,
So those guys are there. There's a few, right?
yeah. And I think ideally, with the way things are progressing with like Clash and things like that, hopefully it will start bringing more people in because ideally you want people to be joining this. I mean, Klokov's like got into CrossFit now and everything. It's like it would be awesome. Like that's people always talk about like wanting to see like Klokov or Lasha get into strongman. It's like I mean that would
Well,
be
I saw
incredible.
Klokov like a long time ago, kind of like at like in between like weightlifting and CrossFit. There's a video out there him trying to like he was doing like 120 kilogram log or something like that, and it was like he'd never pressed a day in his life because it's so awkward, right?
Yeah. Uh,
But I mean, a little acclamation. I'm sure he would have probably figured it out. But I mean, it kind of like demonstrates too, like the uniqueness of strongman and the skill set required to compete in strongman, right?
yeah. So I think there is that like there are a lot of advantages the sport has and everything because it is like I think trying to maintain that element of like a compelling thing to watch and everything. I think it's kind of a delicate balance because people do want to see these max lifts and everything. And it's like you can't necessarily always do max lift after max lift and everything. But I think hopefully that format of like Clash of being able to do things in a matter of hours, like that's huge for being able to keep people engaged in watching something. Because it is that idea of like, if you're telling me it's going to be a whole work day of watching something for most people, unless they're like hardcore fans, that's like the barrier of entry.
Yeah, I'll wait until there's like a replay, and I'll fast forward through it.
Yeah.
Watch the performances that I want to watch, and then move on. But
Yeah.
I think that though is why like World's Strongest Man and ISSA and Strongman Champions League, getting ISSA defunct now, but long since defunct now, but they recorded the performance, the competition, edit it, and release at a later date because they shrink it down and focus on the highlights, um, which makes a really nice. They put out a nice product. I mean, SCL puts out a product as good as World's Strongest Man. But I think those days are. They're probably never going to stop doing it. Those organizations, and we'll see what the future holds. But Clash is proving that we can actually have live competition, which is more, I think, more attractive to sports fans, right? Because everything else is live, right? All of your mainstream professional sports are all live. That's what people want to see, right? We don't want to wait because it was always the question is like, well, we already know who won. Why do we have to wait until Christmas or whatever to watch
Yeah.
World Strongest Man? Everybody knows what happens, right? Um, so yeah, I mean, it's really nice of what Clash is doing, and they're doing it very, very well. I mean, it's Clash and ADL, right?
Yeah.
who are producing
So Don
those
and Nancy
live
are just
live
wonderful from
broadcasts. So
ADL. Like as far as like good friends go out there, like Don and Nancy have just done a wonderful job of like, and just to see how things have changed over the past few years for them, of like seeing them film like small local events here in Texas and everything, and like taking it to a larger and larger level as they go. Because
yeah,
there
what's up
is
with
that
them? They're
like,
heading to Australia.
yeah,
That's
they
pretty
they
badass.
yeah, they've gone everywhere. And I think a part of it like is like showing that, because it is one of those things of like, if you ask people which they would rather have, like live footage or an Excel spreadsheet and camera foot, like cell phone camera footage until Christmas, people are going to want that live footage. So I think there's like a way of trying to condense things and everything, but it all comes down to having like standardized, well run events and everything.
Oh
Like
yeah,
that does bring people in and
yeah.
everything.
And you still need some of that engagement though. And I mean, ADL does a great job of the live stream. Like you said, it requires the promoters and the organizers to actually run the show, so that it can be live streamed well. From an engagement standpoint, I would still love to see some things added. We kind of, we talked about the scoreboard before, or some kind of score communication. I don't know if that's scoreboard on a single class group of 10, 15 athletes is possible, doable potentially. um or from a live perspective, making sure scores and everything are communicated frequently enough that viewers are able to keep up and follow, which I think they do a pretty good job on ADL in between the events. I think they show the scores to
Yeah.
everyone,
Because
which is awesome. But
yeah.
one thing that I haven't seen in the U.S. Yet, uh, and this is a big one for me actually, just as an athlete. But I think it's a really good step towards that engagement with the audience is the interviews with the athletes. I was asked once why I like SCL so much, and that was my answer. I love the interviews, man. It actually makes me feel like I'm a valuable athlete, and that and they actually want me at the show, um, because there's no bias either. Like I think I've been to two SCL shows, two SCL under 105K Worlds, and both of them, I'm pretty sure they interview every single athlete at least one time. Both times I went, like they interviewed the shit out. It's just like it's a good opportunity for the athletes to display their character, talk about what they were feeling during the event, um, any other thoughts that they have. And in US we don't really have that much, and I think that's kind of lacking. I think it would go a long way to improve that audience engagement.
Yeah, I think that makes a big difference of trying to really focus on that engagement of like get the interviews out there and like personalize it more and everything, because people are much more likely to watch someone who they've listened to talk and everything. Of the difference of the UC of like Martins has like a fantastic YouTube channel and everything, and seeing like the kind of following that gets of like more and more you have these top athletes putting out their YouTube videos of like everyone at World's Strongest Man now has a YouTube channel and everything. And there is that like people are willing to watch like hours and hours of these people talking, and like to be able to see that during competition would be great and everything. And even
I
like,
mean, World's Strongest Man does it, right? I mean,
yeah,
they're always pulling the guys. It doesn't matter who they are, right? It's almost always like the first guys to go, the first guy that overtakes the best score, right? Um, and then at least the winner of the event, and maybe a couple more in there. Like there's an opportunity for all those guys to speak. Like I said, without any real particular bias. I think maybe once you start getting towards the end, they're going to probably start interviewing the guys that are in the lead a little bit more, like the top 3, 5 guys. But in the prelims there's like really not a lot of bias. They give everybody that opportunity to kind of get in front of the camera and speak. I know SCL does, which I think is huge, right? That's huge for um, athlete. Do I want to say development? I mean, because it kind of is, right? It's like in
Yeah.
front of the audience. I mean, you're kind of helping that athlete kind of develop the rapport with the audience, right? And giving them more of a platform to be more than just like a meat sack on the field, right? We're a little bit more than just like meatheads moving weight, right? We're individuals. We each have our own personalities, and our own, trials and tribulations that get us to where we are. And having an opportunity to discuss that, I think bring should, probably I'm not in Europe, so I don't see it firsthand, but I gotta believe that that brings more eyes and attention to the sport, because one thing that is very, very noticeably different between competitions here in the US and even the top level ones, even World Strongest Man and Europe, is the size of the crowd that shows up. The United States is like non-existent. I don't know if you saw the year, and I can't remember what year it was, where World Strongest Man was in Las Vegas. Like the number of people that showed up to watch was like bagel, man. Like nobody came out to
Yeah.
World's fucking Strongest Man in Las Vegas. I think the ones that were in Florida were maybe a little bit different, but you go to Europe. I mean, there was probably in 2018 when we did Underworld 105K SCL Worlds. There was like, man, like towards the end of finals, there was like 3,000 people there, man. It was crazy. Like the crowd was crazy. Um, I just watched a video. So a couple of guys that I know that I've met actually over there, they were just in Germany. Like the crowd was like insane,
Yeah.
right? So, we kind of have to kind of think about that. Like, what are they doing different than we're doing? Maybe one of those things is that they're giving the athletes more of a platform to, engage the audience. That's one of potentially many, but
Yeah, because I think those videos do of like people do want to hear from the athletes and they do want to like personalize it because it is like it makes it less of this abstract concept. We're like, oh, you hear this guy's story of like hearing Tom Stoltman talk about like struggling with autism and like or dealing with that growing up. And then you see him do like his amazing Atlas stone lift and everything, like a 22-inch stone that's like just massive over that and everything. I think there is a need for that. And I think a part of it is simply utilizing tools we already have of like making sure if your comp's going to pay for Iron Podium, update it like live, like make sure it's being constantly updated. And if
yeah,
you have like flat screen TVs are so cheap these days, like throw one up and put it on there and
sure.
everything because like it
You're
is
right.
nice
It
seeing it
kind
on
of
your
goes back
phone.
to that score sharing. Like we have the capability to do it. Why are so many shows like just, again, right? You got these promoters that this isn't their life, this isn't their livelihood, this isn't their profession, but that's such a simple like thing that's readily available and it's right there, and it's so easy to just put somebody on scoring. I mean, there's so many people that want to volunteer for shows, right? Just put somebody on the scoring and keep it up to date,
Yeah.
and make sure that the link is available, or like you said, put up a TV or projector if it's indoors, right? I mean, that's an easy thing to do.
Yeah. And I think oftentimes it is I think people don't always realize of like kind of like we've talked about that vicious cycle of like there's not very much money in it. So sometimes you can't always like put as much time in it. But there is in your example of Europe and like seeing how people do watch everything online, like there is a desire for this stuff. Like there is a need out there. But I think oftentimes people can't my wife is incredibly patient, so she goes to shows with me and everything. But she has been to shows that literally took 7 hours. It's not very clear what's going on. There isn't this thing, and it. I think small things I've seen that make a difference is like keeping Iron Podium updated live. But also, I've seen some people get one of those little electronic score counters that whenever you hit the thing, it's actually updating this digital thing, so people can easily look over and be like here's what's happening.
Yeah,
Of
I heard
like,
that recently. Like that was an
yeah,
idea I had a long time ago, and I saw somebody actually do it recently.
yeah,
Which I was like, wow, man, I was thinking about doing that, and that's awesome because yeah, I think they just had like a little thing, and
yeah.
yeah, it was just like an incremental digital deal, just counting reps at that particular station, right? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, like I've seen those, or like people throw it up on a tablet or something like that thing that it's just a clicker of like a rep counter of like keeping people actively engaged. Because otherwise, you end up with this thing where only your core fans are really super engaged. Whereas, like, the reason that like national sports like football and stuff make money is because there's like there's a lot of passive fans and
Can
everything.
be
There are a lot
passive
of
because you can tune in like after the first quarter and see what the score is, and then tune in right after halftime and listen for 5 minutes and get a little bit of feedback from the commentators and see the score and know where the game is, right?
Yeah. And I think a part of it, I mean, it would definitely take some coordination, but sometimes I think with what would be nice is like once people start to utilize these technologies a bit more, what would be handy is you have your display screen with Iron Podium up there, but also if you have like during the breaks and everything, you could just pull up Iron Podium pages for like other shows that are going on to just be like, oh, like here's what's happening at this other big show across the country or whatever on today. Because like Saturdays is like a huge day for competitions. Of these ideas of utilizing what's already out there, like a rep counter, a scoreboard, these things, like you said, because I think I hadn't even thought of that, but like the passive fan wants to be able to tune in and know exactly what's happening without having to like talk to a bunch of people or like go on forums of like, and you have
Right.
Reddit threads with so many comps where people are like just live updating that. And it's like, it would be
Well,
nice.
that's not even very live though. I mean,
Oh,
all
yeah.
those spreadsheets are like, there's always like an error for a couple hours because they didn't get all the scores, and you're waiting for it to update. And yeah, I mean, yeah, getting an Iron Forum and or Iron Podium, and there's another one in Europe too, Strength Results, which is somewhat similar. Um,
Yeah.
that has the same capability. Like you said, just keep it up to date, like in real time. Like it's not just. I mean, it's great for the audience, right, to keep up with what's actually going on. But it's good for the athletes too, right? Strongman's a sports is a points game,
Yeah.
and part of the strategy in strongman is requires you to know what the score is. And I don't want to veer back to the conversation before value, but these athletes are paying, for they want value for their money, right? You need to be giving them the scores so that they can play the game, right? This
Yeah.
idea, I think kind of got away from some of us here. Was this like you have to show up and just break your back on every single event, right? That's not strongman. Strongman's a points game. It's a strategy, right? I mean, there's strategy to it. And in order to play the game, you have to have the score. So yeah, I mean, that's a pretty simple, it's a very, very simple thing for promoters to do. And it's surprising how few actually, execute that at all, let alone well.
Yeah. And I think, like you said, playing that game, that, like, I mean, it's interesting watching. I mean, we've mentioned it before on the show and everything, but Alexei Novikov of like you, because he knows the points. People be like, oh, he definitely has two more reps in him. And they're like, oh no, he just knew exactly what he needed to do to get to the next stage. Of oftentimes, like there is that game of you'll see people who, I mean, Mateusz was like a good example and everything, but there are those competitors who will be near the top of every event, but then zero an event. And you have people like Martins, who oftentimes he'll win because he comes in second place in every event.
Right.
Everything being able to like know exactly the standings of things. And I think a part of it, of ideally, you want to create a sustainable ecosystem for this, of like a well-run show means more people will want to do it next year. More athletes want to show up. Of like, what is it? The Battle Axe Showdown in Dallas here with like that one's a real popular local show people like because it's super well run and everything. And I think if people are willing to put in the effort to like do a good show, people want to keep doing it and
Yeah.
everything. So this
Or
idea,
pay a lot of money too. I mean, that's always helpful.
yeah, it's true. It is like that does make a difference. I think so. The main thing really is like kind of like what we were talking about at the beginning with coaching and stuff. You're only going to get out of it what you actually are willing to put into it and everything. This idea of, I think sometimes people, it's the cycle of like, well, I'm not making enough doing this, so I can't put as much effort into it. And it's like people are going to know that, and it's going to turn out that way. Like you said, these small little things of trying to have these shows like so people want to do it again because it is one of these things of if you're going to have your shows on Saturdays and you're telling people if the event starts at 2, you ideally want it to be over by, I mean, at 10 in the morning or 9 in the morning, you want it to be over by like a little after lunchtime, 2 p.m.
Right.
at the latest. And you have so many shows going of like, you have shows that literally go so late that they just have to cancel the last event and everything. Or it's just like things
I don't think
suddenly
I've ever been one that
appear.
canceled the last event, but I mean, you're right. I mean, some of them goes
There was
just
a
like,
local one that did, and
oh wow,
it's legendary here in
it's
Texas.
legendary. I mean, that would
Yeah.
be, man, I'd be pissed if I was an athlete.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's a lot like, amateur shows are going to probably remain that way for a long time because again, I mean, they're the ones that are, I mean, bringing in the absolute least amount of money, right?
Yeah.
They're the most reliant on the most having the most registrations because that's their primary source of revenue. Or potentially, I think for some of them it is certainly a significant amount of revenue. Um, and I think there's kind of a belief that you have to cater to all these weight classes too. But I mean, not having a big budget, I mean, when it's so athlete centric, right? To attract athletes, you got to have crazy events. You see that a lot of times, right? The promoters are going to go and have some kind of crazy deadlift or crazy truck pull or something. I think they had like the bat car or something here, like a bat monster car or something once, and it's like, yeah, it looks cool, but you only have one of them, right? And
Yeah.
so it slows everything down. Attracts a lot of athletes, but when you have that like single implement for 100 different athletes, man, it's because it's going to take a freaking long time.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't really, I don't know what the answer is there. I mean, if you want the athletes, maybe you kind of have to have those events, but if you want to have faster shows, then you have to just have some more basic events that you can have multiple lanes and run really fast. But amateurs got all I don't have any answers for that, man.
I think,
that's a tough one.
yeah, it's one of those things of like trying to balance things out of like, I think things that they can do is like utilize those resources of everyone's paying for Iron Podium, actually use it. Like actually use what you're paying for. Like do like trying to have a well-run event doesn't actually cost very much money if you're like keeping things organized. But I think it tends to people tend to want to almost overdo things in a way of like you said of that idea of like thinking this would be an amazing event and then you realize suddenly there's only one lane for this whereas like
Or it breaks. That
yeah,
happens. That happens far too often.
yeah, and then it's like thrown off of like what do you do, and it's like at that point it's a slightly less impressive event, but you could have just gotten 2 Ford F-250s and had people go head to head. Like that's double the time. It's also much faster to pull in a smaller truck.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Everything.
again, it kind of goes back to what I said last time too. It's like, you know, if you want if you want to bring money to the sport and you need to grow the audience, you got to be fast and there has to be standards.
Yeah,
But if that's not your goal, like, and I don't know that that's going to be the goal for amateur strongman. It would be nice, right, to have amateur strongman draw a crowd. You know, high school football draws a huge crowd, especially in Texas, right? So I
Yeah.
mean, um, it sure would be beneficial, but if you want to get to that point, you got to make some sacrifices, and one of those sacrifices is the big exciting gnarly events.
Yeah. But it's
Right?
also like,
It's just what happened. It's just what you got to do.
yeah. I mean, it's a balancing event because part of it, it's like people do want to, like, they like to see those like crazy events, but it's also like how many people are actually staying the 5 hours that it took to get to that event and everything. I think so it is like a balancing act of like, how can you engage the most amount of people in the most effective amount of time of that idea. I think oftentimes like people, at least part of like the whole reason I'm in meetings with work is like trying to be a more lean or agile company because like that's where the money's at, is like streamlining things, like being efficient about doing things. And I think at the end of the day, trying to do that as well with like sports and stuff, of like having these standard things of like part of what, I mean, my younger sister actually listened to our first episode and she was saying it's nice, she does CrossFit, and she was saying it's nice to be able to see your score across how all the boxes and stuff of like these very standardized quick events of like some of their events of
You
like
can
people
compare,
watch.
like you said, like you can compare across the boxes because they're pretty standardized events.
Yeah. And that idea of like everyone's using the same basic equipment and stuff. But it's like you said, like that's not always in people's mind. That's not always exciting. I see sometimes people criticize a local strongman event because they're like, oh, they just do the standard events and everything. And it's like sometimes that's the easiest way to do it, of like to make sure that way you can compare to like, I mean, I brought it up before, but like static monsters of like having that basic
Yeah.
like log 18-inch deadlift and
Yeah,
everything.
but I mean, I've never done a static monsters, and I don't know. I mean, it seems kind of popular, but I don't think it's super popular amongst athletes, though.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, that's what I was saying here just a minute ago, is like, for amateur promoters, they're kind of stuck in that position of athletes being sort of that primary source of revenue, and in order for them to bring in money to either pay for their time or other resources they're going to use in that competition, they need to make it attractive enough to bring in the athletes. And strongman being so athlete centric for so long, the thing that attracted a lot of people to it is the odd object, the spectacle events. So I think promoters kind of find themselves, kind of between a rock and a hard place there. You know, can I do? It's easier to do basic events. I can run a more efficient and fast show, but are the athletes going to come then?
Yeah.
But then there's that sacrifice, right? You have more athletes because you've got these crazy attractive events, and it takes all day to do the show. Then there's no audience going to show up and watch it, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of a big old double-edged sword, right? From that perspective for those shows. Um,
Yeah. It's a tough one of like, I think a part of it is trying to find like a good way to balance all those things out, of like finding people who, like we've talked about before, of like athletes, you need to really push yourself and everything like at the local level and stuff. But also I think as promoters of like and volunteers of like trying to do those little things to make it more engaging, to say,
yeah,
hey, we have a shoestring budget, but we can make a pretty fun show. Because at the end of the day, like a well-run, small strongman show doesn't actually cost that much money. If you think you need a few logs, a few deadlift bars, possibly two trucks for a truck pull, and
yeah,
like one other event and everything. I think and the thing is, some of those small spectacle events, I know they have mixed feelings with some people, but like some of the ones they used to have with like World's Strongest Man and stuff, of like sumo wrestling or head to head, like events like that, like those were always like interesting just from that spectacle thing. Like you don't
Right.
necessarily have to like have a spectacle event that like is essentially a one lane thing, because that's really what like bottlenecks so many comps and everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree, man. For me too, I mean, after competing for so long, I'd much rather forego the spectacle events and just, strongman is still kind of a all the events are spectacle, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the log is a big diameter, awkward implement. Monster dumbbell, circus dumbbell is a big, awkward implement. Atlas stones are a big, awkward implement. I mean, everything's still awkward, right? We don't need,
Yeah.
I just, for me, I don't care about the big, crazy. I don't know. I can't even think of a good example now. I don't need a special basket deadlift slash wheelbarrow, right? Or
Yeah.
whatever. Some of the crazy things we've done in the past. I mean, we've had like, carry load wheelbarrow into a deadlift or whatever, at various events. I think the first time I ever did that actually was way back in 2014 at a Platinum Plus NAS show. But yeah, I mean, anymore, just let's deadlift, man. I mean, let's get after it. There's plenty of bars and plates available. There's lots of logs available. There's plenty of Atlas stones, sandbags, kegs, stuff. Let's just get through let's do the show. Let's get through it. I mean, um, we're still able to compete. Performances are still going to determine the outcome. Faster is better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's just my opinion. I don't think we need all the crazy events anymore. Over the years, I mean, there's staple events, right? Let's just stick to them because honestly, for the vast majority of strongman athletes that are going to advance through the ranks, you have to be good at log press, axle press, dumbbell press, yoke, farmers, Atlas stones, maybe some kind of like conditioning event, sandbag carries. That's like that. That's gonna get. I mean, you don't even have to do all those presses. Just be a good clean and presser, right? A log, farmers, yoke, Atlas stones, some kind of conditioning carry medley, right? That's if you can do that, you're gonna probably be able to do anything if you can do those well, right? So I mean, those are events that are you see over and over and over consistently. These one-off events just like they don't matter really at the end of the day. You're never
Yeah.
going to do them again, right? Very unlikely.
Yeah. And I think that's like a small step towards, like you said, standardizing it, of making it so these things can have more direct comparisons and stuff makes a big difference.
Yeah, I mean, again, I mean, IFSA that was kind of one of IFSA's big things. Like they actually standardized their equipment. I can't remember if we talked about that or not, but so they, they still had a bit of a variety, right? I mean, they had yokes, farmers, shield carry, deadlift, squat, log. I don't know if there was a dumbbell. There was an axle, clean and press, Atlas stones, but it was guaranteed that every time you had one of those events, it was the same. It was either the same implement or was exactly the same dimensions, right? And they published their dimensions on their website, so anybody could go and replicate it to train with. And from my perspective, that's actually like a huge. It, it's kind of a bummer it didn't catch on more because not only is it better from that audience engagement kind of standpoint in the way that we can build stats and it becomes more comprehensive over time for audience members, right? Because then it's like it's easier to compare, you know, one log world record to the next world record because it's done on the same exact implement, right? But but from an athlete perspective, this is where I just like makes perfect sense to me is that we're not making a lot of money to begin with. And if you want to do well at a lot of shows these days, you have to spend a lot of money on the specific equipment that they're using at the show, assuming you know it, right? And we tend to do this with back in the day, while it was a freaking amazingly innovative implement, like the Stone of Steel, right? Um, it's not, in my opinion, I mean, yeah, it's round and you're picking it up and loading it like an Atlas stone, but training on an Atlas stone is nothing like training on a Stone of Steel. So if you wanted to do well in Stone of Steel that was coming up, you had to go buy one. It was like $1,100 delivered, right? We all went and spent all this money on these things, and I haven't, I think we had them in competitions for a year and a half, and then never saw them again. Right. It's the same with like some of the logs. Like people will go and drop like crazy amounts of money so that they can train on the specific log because it's a unique length and diameter and body weight and whatever else. And then like the next show you're going to use something else. So the benefit is that if we had some standardization on every log was the same exact dimensions, we could buy one implement and be done, right?
Yeah.
And for a sport that's not like athletes aren't earning any money or very little. You mean even the guys at the top? I mean, I mean the guys on World's Strongest Man, the very top guys, the Pujanowskis and Shaws and Big Z's and stuff. I think they probably ended up making enough money to not have a full-time career. But did you watch the story of Eddie Hall, man? The guy was like a mechanic on the side on his journey to being the world's strongest man. Like there was no money until he was either just about there or had finally won that title. And I mean, he ended up making a lot of money after. But for the weight class athletes, man, we're not making any money, but we're kind of in this position that if you want to do well, you're going to spend a fuckload of money. And that's why I've spent so much money, $150,000. I mean, a lot of that's tied up in equipment, right?
Yeah.
Various equipment that I have. I mean, I have 4 logs, right? I mean, 4 completely different logs. Um, did I need those? It would have been nice if I could have just bought one and been done, right?
Yeah. I think that's hard when like there's so many different like federations and stuff and things going on and everything. And I think oftentimes
There's
people
no
are,
standardization anyway. I mean, from organization to organization, they all will use like a different brand of log every freaking show they do. Every nationals has different equipment.
yeah. And I think that's why hopefully, and you see it like Rogue doing so many things now, at least it's standardized at the top and everything a bit more,
Yeah,
but it's still that idea of finding ways to like save everyone money, but eventually make more money would be ideal. And I
yeah,
think that's the main thing is like the key is trying to find that way of balancing out like audience engagement while still having good events for the athletes and everything. And I think there are a lot of great tools now that can be leveraged as long as they're leveraging it properly
yeah.
and everything. But I think
I
the
agree.
biggest thing overall is that idea of like to do well at something, you need to actually try to do it well and everything. Like success
And
isn't
it goes
going to come
all
right.
around. It goes all around from athletes to promoters to
Yeah,
um, everything that you do in life.
because these things all feed each other and they all feed into each other overall of like one can't happen without the other of like what benefits promoters should benefit the athletes. Like there should be like a symbiotic relationship where these
Yeah, I
things
agree.
are like,
And vice versa.
yeah, vice versa. And also for like the audiences of like if you can get more casual people involved in these things, like that makes a huge difference of like comparing like crowds in Europe versus like crowds in the
Yeah,
US and everything.
yeah. And again, I don't know if that's going to happen. All the way to the lower level shows.
Yeah.
But I mean, even the higher level shows still have some work to do in that regard, right? I mean, it's just the fact of where the sport is at. And maybe a lot of times when I'm having these discussions, it's probably more, in my mind, is probably more relatable to the upper shows, even though they're still doing really good. And I mean, some of them are like Clash is doing an excellent job. Um, and by no means am I criticizing Clash, because again, I love what they're doing. I think they're a great group of guys. They have a lot of heart and a lot of passion. Just the little things like that. You know, everything in life should be continual improvement, right?
Yeah.
We should never, like, nobody, and I'm not saying they are, but everybody should always have that perspective of like, there's still something better that we can do. Because as soon as you say like this is good enough, right? That's complacency leads to stagnation, right?
Yeah. And I think that all ties in of these things of like trying to create that continuous improvement and everything. I realize it's getting a bit late.
Is it? I have no idea how long we've been talking, man.
I don't know. It's almost 7 o'clock.
Oh shit. Okay,
Yeah.
so we've been talking for another hour and a half.
Yeah. It goes by the
Man,
way.
yeah, we kind of talked about a lot of things today.
Yeah. Kind of like spread out and everything.
I mean, there's a lot to talk about, and I'm kind of excited to keep having these conversations. Before we go, I kind of realized too in our last conversation that the more we talk, like I have kind of like thoughts and opinions, and sometimes like I know things are wrong. I don't really know why until we talk it out. And I think with our last episode, the idea of the novice career class, like I had the gut feeling and the intuition, like I didn't like it. But I don't know if I really understood why I didn't like it until we got almost to the end of the last episode. And it was like you said, these guys are like just beating on the new guys just to win, right? And the kind of the revelation was is that maybe these guys are actual bullies, right? And I think that's what I really don't like about it. And so the kind of my point is, it's like these conversations are good. Like they're kind of helping us get to the root of various issues. Talking it out has been very productive, I think, up to this
Yeah.
point.
I think overall it has been good. And I think it's always nice to like hear that different perspective to like kind of talk through these ideas, like you said, that you intuitively know in your head, but you don't always know like why this is an issue. Or like, but also I think what's good is like trying to find these constructive ways to like help people and everything. Cause that's the idea of like, I think overall of the theme really is like you want to help people who are new athletes trying to get into strength sports and everything, but you also want to help people like you want this to be financially sustainable for people and everything of like that idea of like you don't want this vicious cycle where you're overpaying for online coaching at the beginning, then you're paying for competitions that you can't complain about, and then you're dealing with events that aren't run well and
Right.
everything. And it's just this like cycle. And then eventually you do that enough times that then you start charging people for your coaching and then running your events. And it's like we
and
want to break
and
out.
just doing it just as awful as what you've become accustomed to, because maybe you don't know any better, right? And I've kind of thought about that sometimes about competitions. People just keep paying and just being like happy that they have anything at all. And it's like, well, you haven't been introduced very well to start with, so maybe you don't know any better, which is
Yeah.
unfortunate too. So yeah, I mean, I think a big, hopefully a big positive that comes out of these podcasts is that people realize that there is a better way, and that their money, whether it's being spent on coaching, competition, or otherwise, like you deserve value for your money, and you know buyer beware, right?
Yeah. And I think that goes across of like these things of because oftentimes you have a cynical side of people that's always like people will sink to the lowest level they can. But the reverse side of that coin is that people will rise to standards that you will surprise you. Like if those
Right.
standards are up there, like people genuinely like I tend to be like an optimist about everything, but it's this idea of I don't think the average person out there wants to be bad at what they do in any capacity and everything. Like I
Right.
think never, even when I was working like delivering pizzas and everything, like at least for me, I wanted to be good at everything I'm doing and
Sure.
stuff because it is like one of those things of for me that was the biggest lesson I ever learned working with pizza delivery is when I came in with a bad attitude, the customers could tell. And then I would get less tips and then it would get worse. Where sometimes you just had to break out of that cycle and like have a good conversation with the customer and you get a decent tip. And that
Yeah.
would like instantly, it's funny of like, we'd always notice like talking to some of the other drivers that like if you get one $10 tip, you're going to get more $10 tips throughout the night. if you get stiffed or if someone doesn't tip you at the beginning, you're gonna like that cycle will go, because then it's like you slip up and you're kind of frustrated, like it's a cycle. So a part of it is like that energy you put out there in the world. But like you said, of like trying overall everything you want to do, especially for you as like veteran athlete, like you want to set a good example for people and say like you deserve to be successful at what you do. Like we want the athletes to be successful, but also as promoters of like ideally you want it to be a fulfilling thing that you can
Right.
do year after year without just getting burnt out and eventually just giving up and
Yeah.
moving on to
I
something
don't
else.
know. I don't know if anybody deserves to be successful.
Oh
They
yeah.
definitely deserve to get value for their money.
Yeah,
But I mean, success is earned, right?
it's true.
But I think that people do deserve to be how do I want to say this? Like being exposed to a culture that encourages continual growth, right? And
Yeah.
in that regard is hey, we've got standards, and one of those is it's like you're not going to be allowed to continue being in the lowest, lightest weight class just to bully people for your own ego, right? Like, I mean, that's a
Yeah.
standard, right? And that's holding people accountable, right? And holding each other accountable leads to good growth. And that's part of like camaraderie, right? Is holding each other accountable. It's part of brotherhood or sisterhood or whatever you want to call it. Um, the fraternity or whatever it is holding each other accountable in pushing each other to be your very very best, but also not allowing each other to to be I don't know, to do unsatisfactory things, right? Whatever that
Yeah.
is. I mean, I'm kind of stuck on this bully thing now. Like now that I kind of realize that that's sort of what it is.
Yeah.
Like we're not okay with that, and we want you to realize that, push you forward, because it's what is right. It's we're here to help the new athletes grow and rise through the ranks too, and that's not helping them. That's keeping them down, which is really unfair. But also, if you're not willing to do that and be accountable and be the better person, right? Then maybe the right answer is for the community to start pushing people out, right? But
Yeah. And I think that is one of those things of trying to find that balance of like you want people to want to do this and everything. And I realize didn't mean to say like everyone deserves success, but I think people don't always know necessarily what they could do better. There is a cycle of like if you've only ever known one way to do things, you don't always think of that. Of like, I mean, talking to like one of our friends, Frank, and stuff, realizing he was like, I didn't even think about putting up a TV with the Iron Podium. I paid for Iron Podium. Like, I didn't even think about that. And people saying, like, I didn't even think about doing a rep counter or even just charts that show the weight of like what's actually being lifted and
yeah,
everything, rather than having to ask someone, like, I was in the bathroom, what are they doing right now?
yeah, I actually kind of like that. There's some local promoters here that have been doing that, where they've got like the little flip counter things, right? The little
Yeah.
they're putting it next to the event station to show what the weight is. I'd like that. That's actually
Yeah.
that's a good innovative way to communicate what's actually being achieved, right? The weight that's being lifted.
And I think that's to tie it all back in of this idea of like, kind of like the lean mindset with companies of like simplicity actually sells and everything. Like sometimes I think people tend to
Simplicity
overcomplicate
saves
things.
you money.
Yeah,
Right?
because it saves money on all sides of like you think not having too many crazy implements means it's easier to train for, but it's also lower budget for the show that you can put towards other things of like having a flip counter, those things it's like $10 for two of them on Amazon. Like
Yeah.
that's an easy way that people know what's happening in every lane and everything. Because I think these things that are small of I think people tend to think because like the nature of entertainment these days is this idea of like you want to be viral, you want to be big, you want to be explosive and everything. And it's like realistically, you want to be consistent. Like consistency is what will, with working out, with training, all these things, like in the long term, being consistent pays off way more than doing these exceptional things here and there and everything. If you see after a while, like if you do too many competitions in a year, you start to have diminishing returns on your performance and
I was gonna
everything.
say, yeah, anytime you like start lifting too heavy too often, you start having diminishing returns.
Yeah. And I think that's a kind of like a theme throughout the rest of life and everything. And I think the main thing is we're not necessarily out here to bully the bullies, but we're saying like we want everyone moving forward of like you don't want to stay static in life of like you want to
Can you bully the bullies? Like, I mean, I've never
we'll
heard that
bully them.
before. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, if you're telling, like, you're calling the bullies out because they're bullying people, right? You're not really bullying them. You're standing up for the people they're bullying.
Yeah.
Um, and again, like, we as a community need to like have less tolerance of that, right? Again, the spirit of the sport is to be, to aim for being the strongest, right? Again, keeping in mind that journey, is going to be fraught with failure, mistakes, trials and tribulations, right? But the idea is to continue pushing forward, and part of that forward path is moving up, challenging yourself, right?
Yeah.
Not staying at the starting line because it's easy, because you can, boot the people, back in the back of the line off the path, and keep your place, continue being at the front of the line, right? Or that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, there needs to be less tolerance of that, and promoters and other athletes need to start like saying, hey, it's time that these guys move up. It's not okay. It's not okay to beat on the new guys just for a win. It's not okay for the pro to come in and beat on the amateurs because it's an easy win, for whatever reason. Like, we need to have less tolerance of that, because in a society that frowns upon bullying, which they should, right? It's kind of surprising that we allow that kind of, it's not explicit bullying, right? We're not going out of
Yeah.
our, people aren't going out of their way, I think, to hurt those people directly, but I mean, it is kind of a form of bullying, right?
Yeah.
Um,
No, I
so
think
we should have less tolerance.
yeah.
That's my final word, man.
That's your final word. And my final word is the whole thing is we're just like actually go out there and like really do hard shit. Like just challenge yourself. Like just set your bar high of like as a promoter, think of those little things. What can you do to set you apart from other people? As an athlete, how can I be better? How can I improve myself? Because at the end of the day, like do hard shit, put in the work.
Yeah,
Like
buddy.
that's really the note we really want to end on.